Greetings, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for another section of our program called The Memories of Plymouth. It is 2023, February, and this is our 7th year. So this is the first interview in our new year. So welcome. We've been doing this for quite some time now. Our goal from the very beginning was to showcase the history, the background of some of the people in the area, and try to save it. We're hoping in future generations they'll say, oh, I have a chance to watch this again. I'm going to see Roger Klose. Now I'd like to introduce Roger Klose. Thank you for joining us today. And after 2 years, I think we can do this now.
My pleasure.
Some of the people in our audience may not know you, and therefore we're going to do some questions that identify you and your family and your background. Are you ready to begin?
Shoot.
You got it. All right. First one, please state your full name for our audience.
My name is Roger Henry Klose.
And is Henry a namesake name?
Yes, my mother's brother was named Henry.
Mm-hmm. And then, where were you born?
I was born in Mineola, New York, which is on Long Island, about 15 to 20 miles from New York City.
All right. And date of birth?
May 19th, 1942.
What if I said the paper's wrong? I'm kidding. Okay, I'm kidding.
Last time I checked, that's when it was.
All right, then. How did you get to Plymouth? When did you get to Plymouth?
Well, back in 1947, my father decided he wanted to purchase a farm and raise chickens. And we had friends in New York who had moved to New Hampshire a year or two prior to that. And we had visited them, I think in 1946, in their place in Hanover. And so my father began looking for property in the New Hampshire area. And he found this farm up on Old Hebron Road in Plymouth. And it used to be known as the Old Town Farm. And he thought that that would be a good place to move to and to start his farm. So that's where we ended up. In June of 1947, the family moved into the Old Town Farm on Old Hebron Road.
For our audience sake, what would an Old Town Farm be? Because we don't have one currently.
Well, back in the 1800s, early 1800s, the town fathers in Plymouth needed a place for indigent folks, folks that were homeless and were having a struggle to get along in their lives. So they purchased this farm, and it became a somewhat self-supporting farm for the housing of these folks.
And for people that don't know where your house was located, we can say it is close to Plymouth Mountain? It
is. Mm-hmm. It overlooks Plymouth Mountain, or Plymouth Mountain overlooks it, and we're about 1 mile from the intersection of Texas Hill Road and Old Hebron Road.
All right. Who owned the property beforehand? Do you happen to know that?
Well, my father bought the property from Bill Haskell, who was a farmer down on Lower Intervale. He had a large dairy farm down there. Mm-hmm. And it just so happens that in the summer of 1947, when we moved there, he had pastured a herd of milking cattle up on the pasture that was part of the farm. And so we, coming out of just outside of New York City, had quite an experience with the daily morning and evening milking of the cows, and that was our introduction to a completely different lifestyle.
You would have been quite young, but you had siblings?
Yeah, I was 5 years old at the time, but my brother and sister my sister was 7 years older than I was, and my brother was 6 years older.
How did they orient themselves coming to from a city to this place?
They ate it up. They loved it. And it was a real adventure. It was an adventure for all of us.
That's great to hear. Let's talk about Mom and Dad.
Yeah, my mother was happy to be moving to New Hampshire, and there were a lot of challenges involved because our house had been vacant for many years, and there was no central heat, intermittent running water, and there was no electricity. And my father purchased the property in April of 1947, and he had a very limited time to actually make it livable when we moved in June. So the house was quite a departure from where we lived in New York. We lived in a suburban area in New York, and here we are now in basically going back into the 1800s.
It really was an adventure.
Yeah. So anyway, my mother stayed home for a period of about a year, 1947, 1948, and then she went to work in town.
Do you know any of the businesses she might have worked for in town?
Yeah, our first job was with Toby Lumber Company, which was right on the Common. It was a building right on the Common. I forget the name of the building. It was right next to the Congregational Church, on the other side of the church from the courthouse. And then she subsequently took a job with Air Insurance Company, which was also on Main Street. And after a couple of years there, she went to work at Plymouth Teachers College, and that's where she retired from.
And who did she work under at Plymouth State?
She at first she had a clerical administrative job, but after a few years at that, she became Dr. Hyde's secretary.
And Dr. Hyde was one of the longest. He may have been the longest running president we've had.
I believe he was.
Mm-hmm. All right. And Dad?
And my father was after the chicken farm didn't quite pan out, mainly due to problems with the water system, which happened to be a dug well about 600 feet up in the hayfield from the house, which was fed to the house by a half-inch lead pipe. And that piping system failed, and he had to give up the idea of having a chicken farm. And then he fortunately had the skills of being an electrician and a carpenter, so he did electrical work and carpentry work around town for the remainder of the time.
Probably wish we had him here now. It's hard to get them. It's hard to get them.
He was a good one too.
So you were talking about status of the farm when you first got there. You said it was vacant.
Yeah, other than the fact that the cows were in the pasture, Bill Haskell's cows were in the pasture. It was vacant. It was a typical New England farm with a large barn with interconnecting buildings and other outbuildings. It had a pasture, a large pasture in the same side of the road as the house, and there was a large hayfield on the other side of the old Hedron Road from the house. And then there was quite a bit of woodland involved too. It was about 200 acres in all.
Wow, that's large. And do you know who currently lives there?
It currently is in the Favre estate.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Let's see what we have. Your education.
Well, I went to public school in Plymouth. I started in the first grade. Kindergarten was not available to me because of we were 4 miles out of town, and there were transportation problems for a half a day kindergarten. So I started at first grade, and I went all the way through grade 12, graduated from Plymouth High School.
So at that time, they would not have buses running, and therefore you did not have the transportation.
No, we were lucky to have a bus, in the morning and the afternoon.
Wow. Okay. Some of the teachers' names, perhaps if we drop a few names, our audience might recall one or two of them?
Well, I really don't recall teachers' name grades 1 through 4. However, in grade 5, we moved over into the memorial school, and for grade 5 through 8. And my 5th grade teacher was Mrs. Tapley. My 6th grade teacher was Mrs. Querum. And 7th grade, I think, was Mrs. Sanderson. And I believe that Mr. Tapley, Phil Tapley, might have been a teacher in junior high as well. Mr. Mara. That's about as many as I can. There were others, but I don't recall the names.
How come you don't? Come on, we have a list. I'm kidding. In high school, what was your favorite subject? Do I dare ask?
Yeah, I like the sciences best. Biology and chemistry.
All right. Can you remember the teacher there? I'm wondering if the same one that I had.
Sherb Ramsey was a biology teacher.
Hands goes up. Yep.
And he also taught chemistry.
There we go. There we go. That's a while ago. Was there a subject that you didn't appreciate as much as you should have?
Well, I wasn't too interested in literature and social studies.
Okay. Thinking about high school, were you involved at all with extracurricular activities after school?
Well, those opportunities were limited because I was out of town and transportation was a problem. But I did play 4 years on the Bobcats football team. And the only reason I was able to do that is because my mother was working at the college and she was able to pick me up later in the afternoon and take me home.
All right. Did you go to school after high school? College?
Yes,
Yeah.
I went to the University of New Hampshire.
There we go. There we go. I haven't finished your family yet. You have a visitor here with us?
Yes,
Would you
I
like
do.
to introduce her?
Yeah, this is my wife, Luann. She's here with me, and she's enjoying the show.
I was just going to say she's probably learning more about you now than ever before.
Probably is.
Thank you for doing that. Your employment. Can you go, how far back can you go? Talking about your first job that you might have had, where it was, who it was for.
My first job was the year I got my license when I was 16, my driver's license. And I was employed at Camp Onaway, which is a girls' camp on Newfound Lake. And I was doing general maintenance work like cutting grass and taking care of trash and other miscellaneous jobs.
I'm not being funny. It sounds like a great job. A girls' camp, right? Way back when.
Right.
Right.
My second job was as a laborer for Landers and Griffin Construction Company when they were working on the on Route 90 through Campton, Route 93 through Campton.
When was that approximately? I missed it.
That would have been around 61 to 62.
Perfect. I can remember 93 going through Plymouth around early 60s.
Yeah.
Early 60s.
Yeah.
Same. All right then. Any more as far as work?
Well, after I graduated from college, I took a job as a teacher at Hillsborough Deering High School. I was a biology and general science teacher. And I contracted to teach the following year at Pembroke Academy in Pembroke. And unfortunately, due to that change in employers, my luck ran out with the draft board and I got drafted. So as soon as I got drafted, I went down to Manchester at the induction center and signed up to go to officers candidate school. So I actually enlisted rather than went through the drafting process. And after getting out of the Army, then I was employed at the New Hampshire State Police Forensic Laboratory as a criminalist, and I ultimately became the lab director. I retired in 1995.
When I read that, I kept thinking, what did he do? What were your responsibilities with that position? Is that something you can share with the audience?
Well, you know, it was not a law enforcement position. It was a scientist, forensic scientist. And my duties consisted of analyzing physical evidence in the laboratory. And we also had the responsibility to go to crime scenes, major felony cases, murder cases, and so on, and document the crime scene, photograph it, take notes, collect the evidence. We also very often went to the autopsy and collected evidence at the autopsy and took fingerprints of the deceased and other samples from the deceased. And then when I became a laboratory director, I wasn't involved so much in analysis. However, I did retain the responsibility of doing all the ballistics cases. That's all the firearms identification work.
It sounds fascinating.
It was a very interesting job, a good career, and at that particular time, before a lot of specialization came about in the forensic laboratories, one could really get involved with all kinds of different types of analyses and different disciplines within the forensic science field, and that made it even more interesting.
And I wonder today what we are solving that we couldn't have solved decades ago. It has moved forward.
Well, to answer your question, obviously, when I was in the laboratory, DNA analysis had not become widely in use, so that we had to farm out our DNA cases to the FBI laboratory. But after 1995, the laboratory subsequently was able to actually implement a DNA analysis right at the laboratory in Concord. So that was a big difference. That was a big advancement from when I was there.
Yeah. Interesting. I think you're a first for me, having that position. I've never met anybody that's done that,
Well,
so thank you for
there
that.
aren't too many around.
At one point in time, you enjoyed music. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Let's bring us into that a little bit. When did you start enjoying it? How did you pick it up? What evolved over time?
Well, I first enjoyed listening to music, and when I was in high school, there was a band in high school called the Swingin' Bobcats, and there were three individuals who were in a year behind me at Plymouth High: Les Philbrick, Denny Day, and John Noseworthy. And Les played the guitar, Denny played the drums, and John Noseworthy played the saxophone. When I went to UNH, not having any experience or any talent as far as any musical instrument, I met my roommate, Dave Kent, who has been a resident of Plymouth now for decades. But Dave was from Newton, Mass. And the fact that we were roommates was just a coincidence. And the first thing I noticed when I met Dave in room 25 in Fairchild Hall was that he brought his electric guitar and amplifier. And I had aspirations of being a guitar player because my grandfather gave me an old K acoustic guitar back when I was about 10.
Wow.
And I used to plunk around on that once in a while, but I never knew anything about music, and I never got anywhere with it. But Dave knew some chords. You know, he knew how to play some chords on the guitar, and he taught me some chords. And once I started to get the gist of how chording actually was the basis for, you know, all guitar music really, I right away got my old K guitar down there at UNH and slapped a pickup on it, an electronic pickup, so that it could plug into his amplifier, and things took off from there with him and me, and we started doing little jam sessions in our room, and you know, people would come around and listen to us, and then we actually started to play out a little bit, and we decided, gee, it'd be nice to you know, take this a little further and get a band. Yeah. And we were looking around for talent, so I said to Dave, I said, geez, I know a couple of guys in Plymouth that would probably work out pretty well. Les Philbrick is a really gifted guitar player, and Denny Day is a good drummer, and he's a real character. He'd probably add some color to the group personality-wise.
I like that word, character.
So I introduced Dave to Denny and Les a couple of weeks later, and we arranged to have a jam session. And our first jam session was at Denny's house on Pleasant Street.
Pleasant Street. And
it really worked out good. Things really, you know, gelled as far as the music was concerned. And Dave, fortunately, he was a businessman, ran in his blood. He was a talented manager. He was ambitious, and he had all of these great ideas about where the group should go and so on. So we were very, very fortunate to have him not only as a bass player, but also as a manager. And it just took off from there.
Where did you go? Locations where you played?
We played all over New Hampshire, mostly at schools and at other social events. But we also played out of state. We played, at places like Boston University and over in Vermont and up in Maine. So, yeah, we covered a big territory.
Do you mind if I asked about payment? We're talking about the 60s now.
Yeah, I made enough money to actually make most of my college expenses in my junior and senior year in college. Excuse me. And sometimes we really could make out well. For example, we would go to Dartmouth College for a big football weekend, and we'd have four engagements in that weekend lined up. And we'd actually be contracted by one fraternity, and then he would subcontract us out to other fraternities. We'd play Saturday afternoon at a frat party right after the game, and then we'd play another party after the game, and in the evening, starting about 9 o'clock. They ran about until 1 o'clock. And under special occasions, we'd even play another gig that was started about 1 a.m. and went through about 3 a.m. And then there was always a big party on Sunday afternoon. So we probably each walked away with about $200, which back in 1962 and 63 was really good money.
What's that phrase? You were rolling in the dough?
We were rolling in the dough, and we were rolling in other ways too, but
we're not going there for the audience. We're not going there at all.
I won't go into that, but yeah, it was very lucrative, and the good part about it was so much fun. It was just a really fun way to make money.
I can't think of anything better, to enjoy what you're doing and making money.
Yeah.
That's a good one. We used to go over and dance at the Country Bell, and our audience may not know where it is now, but it was really quite the scene. You had shared something with me, what he agreed to pay you people, not knowing how many people would actually attend. Do you recall that?
Yeah, the Country Bell was a dance hall over on Route 3A on Newfound Lake. And I don't exactly remember how we landed that job, but I think it was the summer of 1962. We approached Harry Houghton, who was the owner of the dance hall, and we said we'd like to play over here if we could. And I think he usually had square dances and that type of thing. We were probably the first rock and roll band that he had, and he said, come over and we'll have you play once a week, and we'll give you 70% of the gig. So and that might have been 15 or 20 people right at the beginning of things. Well, by the end of the summer, we had over 100 people. So we were getting 70% of I think the admission was $1 at the time. All right, I think Harry might have been pleased that he was getting a lot more people. And then he said, next summer of 1963, come back and it'll be the same deal. And we said, great. And during that time, from 62 to 63, we had really increased our show. In other words, it had become much more professional. Wow. And we had added a lot more vocals. Initially, we were more or less an instrumental band, but we added a lot more vocals, and Denny became much more proficient at singing and entertaining. So in the summer of 63, we really were quite a hit over there. And 200 or 300 people would show up. So 70% of the gate became a godsend. And we were really pleased to, I don't know how pleased Harry was, but we were pleased to have that.
Did he make the wrong deal? 70%?
Well, it was that was the last summer that we played there, but it worked out very well for us.
Your rock and roll band,
Yeah,
and the name of it was?
the Crossfires.
Where did it come from, that name?
I actually was the one that came up with the name. We were searching for a name, and the names like the Italics or the Blazers or things like that came up. And I was doing some research one day on some speakers for our equipment, and I saw this term, a crossover network, it said, and I said, crossover, crossfire. And then crossfires, and it just hit me like that. And so I was pretty excited, and I suggested to Dave that Crossfires, I think, would be a good name. And Denny and Les went along with it, so that's the way it was. Crossfires from then on.
If I had all four of you here now and I said, was there a group, a professional group out there that you people tried to imitate, you enjoyed listening to them, what might it be?
Well, being an instrumental band to start out with, Les and I were the guitar players, and we really fashioned our repertoire with the Ventures, who came out with their first hit song was in 1960, I think it was, 59 or 60, was "Walk Don't Run," and that was kind of like one of our theme songs. But we played a lot of Ventures music, but we subsequently realized that the kind of venues we were playing, that we really had to add some vocals things to our repertoire. So we got Denny. He was a good singer, and we got him interested in doing a lot of songs. That wasn't hard to do, because he liked to be a showman, and we did Rolling Stones and Elvis and all of the popular rock and roll players at the time.
I must tell the audience that I listened to you at least one time. We went to one venue, and there you were. And we must have danced.
I remember you.
Oh, you really do? I bet. But never mind. Let's go on and see what happens. Any other stories you might want to share about the group? I mean, it continued for how long?
Well, we continued until 1964, well into 1964. And one of the highlights, I guess, that you might say, was that when we actually recorded a record. And here again, this is where Dave came in. He somehow learned of a record company called Strand Records, and who had an agent in Manchester. So he went to Manchester, and he met with a fellow, I believe his name was Jim Parks, and he kind of sold the Crossfires to Jim Parks, and talked him into actually allowing us to make a record, and which Strand Record would publish. And that came about. The only problem was that Jim Parks, for some reason, decided it had to be a limbo album. And we were a rock and roll band, so limbo wasn't really our particular genre of music. It was a little off to one side from our style.
But was that hot during that particular time? Is that why he caught on to that?
Oh yeah, I mean, you probably heard of Chubby Checker.
Thank you.
And he had a few limbo songs out, and I think that's what was on Park's mind from a business standpoint. So we said, hey, we thought anything is better than nothing. So we made a limbo rock album, and I brought a sample of the album here. It's Limbo Rock, the Crossfires, and this is a LP album, and it was published in stereo and monaural, and we recorded the album at the University of New Hampshire.
See if you can do that.
Yeah, we recorded the album right at the UNH at the Outing Club room. There was a recording studio right off the Outing Club room at the Memorial Union building. So we went in there, and in one day we knocked off 12 songs, and the tape was submitted to Strand Records, and then they published the record. And the record deal itself, the business part of the deal was that we would purchase, I don't know if we purchased them or they gave us X number of albums, maybe 1,000 albums.
Wow.
And we had the exclusive on sales for the New Hampshire. And then Strand Records would have the rest of the country and the rest of the world to sell.
Do I dare
our albums.
ask? How did you fare?
So we were, you know, not only musicians, but we were also record salesmen for a while. But the big value of, we didn't make much money at all with that, but the big value of it was the fact that we could sell ourselves as Strand recording artists, you know, and it made us sound maybe a little better than we were, but that it was a good business angle.
I'm glad I got to touch it. I don't know that many people that have an album out, so you just made my day, I think, on that one. If there was a memory or two about being there, what might it be? And I really appreciated you saying each of you and what the expertise each person had that brought to this group. Is there some story? Is there a memory that you kept all these years as a result of being part of this group?
Oh, there's more than one memory. I mean,
that you can share.
I was just going to say, there's no way you can spend a lot of time with Denny and Les and not have a lot of memories, because they were pretty interesting couple of guys. And yeah, we had a lot of memories. I think that some of the places that we played, like Hampton Beach Casino and over at Old Orchard Beach, where we had a different crowd, and we were greeted as almost stars, you know, which really pumps up your ego. And
shoulders back.
Yeah. And over in Dartmouth, we were pretty popular over there, and one of the fraternities, Sigma Nu, actually made us honorary brothers of their fraternity, which is, you know, I mean, it's just a thing that was kind of neat at the time, you know.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I'm wondering, the audience, it's too bad we don't have a tally here that they could punch in how many of you have this album right now and see if it exists. All right. I'd like to switch gears just a little bit if we can. We're halfway through our show. Talking about Plymouth, where do you live now?
I live in Canterbury now.
All right, all right. But you were brought up here, so we're going to go back a few decades. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. As a kid, thinking about it, you made a comment to me once. You said, I was really an out-of-town kid. What did that mean?
Well, we lived 4 miles out of town on a, you know, Old Hebron Road was a dirt road, and it was about 2 miles long, going from Texas Hill Road over to Reservoir Road. At the time we lived there was only one other occupied house on the road, and that was down the road from us about a tenth of a mile. And an old gentleman by the name of John Barnard and his maid Ethel Yetton lived there. And other than that, we you know, our closest neighbors were a mile and a half away. The closest friend to actually play with was that far and even further. So we were pretty isolated, and so we didn't get into town a lot because of the transportation. My mother had to use the car to go to work, and my father had to use his pickup truck to go to work, so there wasn't much available, in other words, to get into town and participate in a lot of other, you know, town-centered activities.
Mm-hmm. What kind of activities did you do then around the farm with your family, your brothers?
Well, other than work, we had we did a lot of outdoor things. You know, like my brother and sisters, you know, tried to saddle up a couple cows and ride the cows one time. You know, there were all kinds of crazy things we did. And in the wintertime, there was always good sliding and skiing opportunities because there were hills around our farm. And I was involved. I was, you know, pretty enthusiastic hunter. I did a lot of hunting and fishing. There were some brooks around the farm that had trout in them that were good trout streams. So yeah, it was mostly outdoor stuff.
Mm-hmm. What kind of animals would you hunt for way back when?
We had just about everything. The first few years we lived there, we had cows and pigs and sheep, chickens, ducks, turkeys. You know, We had the whole gamut, and we were kind of like a subsistence farm. We grew our own vegetables and own eggs, milk.
I'd like the eggs right now because they're probably from you because they were probably cheaper then than they are right now.
Yeah, they were probably like 10 cents a dozen back then.
I don't even know. Someone said on TV they're like $10 a dozen right now.
Yeah.
Interesting world where we're living in right now, that's for sure. Let's see. Activities in town. There we go. Parents allowed me to drive to the outskirts of the town when I was 15 years old. I thought a license was 16.
Well, it was, but I was in my teens, and my parents realized that I should have the opportunity to participate in certain things like Canteen, which is a weekly Saturday night outlet for kids to go to and dance and hang out. And I said to my folks, I said, "Can you take me to Canteen?" They said, "No, but if you want to drive, you can drive down to the Fox Pond, park the car there, and walk into Canteen." And they said, "You better not go any further than Fox Pond." so I used to do that when I was 15. I drove down to Fox Pond and walked into Canteen, and then I walked back to Fox Pond and drove home. I never abused the privilege.
Got a good boy there, Mom and Dad. They don't know it. I'm still looking for, I've been writing stories, and one was on Canteen. So what I did is I went back through many, many yearbooks to see who I could identify. I went back to the early 50s, and Canteen existed then, but I'd really like to know who started it, why they started it. I can remember when I went to Canteen, the teachers, I think, would give of their time watching us to make sure everything was okay. But you danced all night long. And it was the weekend, correct? It was Saturday?
It was for us, and it was actually in two locations. One location was the Guy East Beer Auditorium, which was in the Spear building. The other one was in the cafeteria of the Memorial Building, which was downstairs in the cafeteria. And there was a rather large room, and they also had it there.
Again, you'd like to thank the teachers that gave of their time, but I don't know what we would have done if we didn't have a place to go, dance all night long, I guess. Did we have bands there at some point, or were they mostly records?
It was, when I went, it was just records.
Records.
Yeah.
Me too. Just, I don't know what these kids today do on the weekends, and I just know it was something for us to look forward to. After a game on a Saturday, you'd go there that night, and I guess parents were relieved a little bit. They thought they knew where their kids were, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I think it was a great thing, and it was a great opportunity for kids to have some fun on the weekends.
Putting you on the spot, where did the name come from?
Canteen?
Yeah.
I have no idea. I think Canteen may suggest drinks and good times. I don't know.
Okay, we'll hold on that one for a while, that's for sure. Talk about the weather, if you would, please, for a little bit. You've had times in your life where that may have controlled what you did, whether or not you went to school. School was canceled. What kind of weather can you remember?
Well, I think the weather impacted our lives a little more than people who lived in town.
Okay.
Because we lived on a dirt road, and we lived out of town, and the road wasn't always maintained as well as it probably should have. So on occasion, we were snowed in, and on other occasions, we were unable to get out of our place because of mud in the road. So there was a mud season, and then there was a winter time, and one winter, and I believe it was in 47, 48, it could have been a little later than that, but I believe it was the first winter we were living in Plymouth at the farm. We had a very windy period in February when the snow drifted down off our 20-acre hayfield, and it all impacted right into the road, so that there was about 4 feet of snow that actually just drifted into the road. And We were isolated up there for about a week, at least 5 days, because the grader couldn't open the road up. The snow was packed so hard and so deep that the grader, which at that time had a big V plow in the front, would ram into that snow and it would just stop it dead. So the town had to hire somebody with a bulldozer to get up there and actually push the snow out so that the grader could clean it up so we could get out. So we were trapped in our house well, not in the house, because especially my brother and sister were running around on the snow drifts and everything. But that's one of the things that happened. The other thing with mud season happened every spring around late part of March and early April. The roads, which were not constructed too well for mud, they were not gravel roads, they were dirt roads, and the roads would break up in the springtime, and there were just these tremendous cavernous ruts in the roads and everything, and if you took a car out there, you'd be bogged down, and until somebody pulled you out, and so yeah, that was another impediment to our getting around in certain times of the year. The rest of the year, the road was not too bad.
I'm questioning whether or not it bothered you that you had to stay home from 5 days of school.
No, not at all. I think, if I remember correctly, though, that particular week was winter vacation week, so we kind of lost out on we lost out on an extracurricular vacation.
Oh gosh, let's see. You arrived here in 1947, I'm reading, and you have a group of old neighboring farmers. Most of them right now, you said, have been vacated, the land or the people as well. Can you mention some of those people? Names that I have a list if you want them.
Yeah, these are back in 1947 and the early 50s, was a period when, I guess, these farms, which were at one time probably in the 20s and 30s and 40s were prosperous, they were now on the wane, and the farmers themselves were getting old, and so these farms were on the last legs. But the farmers, we really liked our neighbors, and those old farmers. They were very nice people, colorful people. They had a lot of stories to tell, and they were always willing to help you out, and there were some that come to mind. Going by road, on New Hebron Road, there was a Elmer Glover, and he had a dairy farm. And Chet Clifford, who lived a little further down the road from Elmer, he had I don't know exactly what his livestock were, but because at the time I think he'd actually stopped farming, but he still lived there. And then on Texas Hill Road, there was Everett Keniston, who had a large farm up there, and I believe at one time he had a dairy farm. And then further up, Kenneth Jennis had a farm way up on Texas Hill Road, almost into Bridgewater. And on our road, John Barnard had a farm, and his farm was on the way out when we got there, and he actually passed away, I think, in 1956 or 57. And that farm was abandoned. We ultimately purchased that farm and fixed it up, and we moved into that place and moved out of the town farm.
The town farm.
But these old farms were I think symbolic of what was happening to the outskirts of Plymouth back in the 50s and early 60s. That it was transitioning from agriculture to other things like development and residential and so on.
It's still nice to drive on the back roads though and see a lot of land.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully we can keep that going.
Right.
You had almost a disaster at your house one time.
Yeah, back in the winter of 1947-48, which was that first winter at the farm, and we did not have any central heat. We had 2 wood stoves, one in the kitchen, which is a big old kitchen wood stove range like type thing that my mother cooked on, and then there was another wood stove in the living room, which was a kind of like a box stove type affair. And in the wintertime, we'd load both those stoves up before we went to bed. Well, I didn't because I was only 5, but my father and my brother did. And one night, in the middle of the winter, my brother happened to wake up and he heard some strange sounds, some crackling sounds, and he out of curiosity, got up and walked into the kitchen. And this house had a big central chimney. And he walked over to the chimney and he heard this noise and he smelled smoke, so he knew right away that there was a fire. And that what happened was that the creosote buildup inside the chimney caught on fire. And then the heating of the brickwork and probably some holes in the brickwork, the fire spread to outside of the chimney into some debris that was piled up along the bricks, probably by 50 or 60 or 80 or 100 years worth of rat and mice activity. So my father, my brother sounded the alarm. My father jumped out of bed and grabbed an old fire extinguisher that was in the wood bin and tried to put it out, but it didn't put the fire out. It was like a smoldering fire. It wasn't really an inferno yet. And then we had, because of our water situation, we had these big galvanized wash tubs up on the second floor, up against the chimney, and we filled those with snow. And overnight, the snow would melt, and then we'd have a water supply for the following days for washing and bathing, doing dishes, and so on. Well, he ran upstairs, and fortunately, these tubs now had water in them from melting, and he upset the tubs of water against the chimney, and that water just flushed down and doused the fire. And he had to do a few little cleanup work with the little smoldering places, but anyway, he got the fire completely out. And so that was a close call. It could have been the end of the old town farm that night, and maybe worse.
Wow, wow. That's an amazing story, amazing story. Happier days. Talk about something fun. You said you used to go to the Plymouth Fair.
Yeah, the Plymouth Fair was definitely fun. I mean, even old John Barnard went to the Plymouth Fair. And I don't know, I think Ethel must have taken him in her old 1935 pickup truck. But anyway, the fair was held on a weekend. I think it started on Friday, and maybe Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And the school system actually let the kids out on Friday. They gave them the day off when the fair was in session. And I guess the theory being that a lot of kids are going to play hooky anyway on Friday, so they allowed us to go ahead and go to the fair or do whatever we wanted to on a day off. I always went to the fair. My mother she was going to and from work then, and she would drop me off at the fair on the way to work, give me $1 bill.
Oh, a dollar bill?
Yeah, for food and entertainment.
$1 bill.
$1 bill. And I'd spend the day at the fair, and then at the end of the day, she'd come and pick me up.
Fun, 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 fun. Yeah. That's one of the memories that so many people have. They enjoyed themselves for those years.
Yeah, it was a fun place.
It was a good one. It was a good one.
And a lot of people we always used to comment that when you walked through the fairgrounds and you looked at the folks, you saw a lot of familiar faces, but you saw a lot of unfamiliar faces. Mm-hmm. People that you knew by the way they looked, the way they dressed. They came from the surrounding hills, and then the fair was a big deal because of the emphasis of agriculture on the fair. And
oldest agriculture fair in the state of New Hampshire. Yeah. That's a good one. And the Crossfires played at the fair as well? We
did. In the 1963 fair, mm-hmm. we were like the main event on Saturday night on the bandstand, mm-hmm. and we played a number of tunes mm-hmm. for the crowd. Mm.
Let's go backwards again. You talk about the 40s. You're born now, 50s and 60s. What kind of changes have we seen over the decades here in Plymouth and the surrounding areas that you can remember?
Yeah, I didn't really think that there was a lot of changes back when prior to 1960, but after that, I think there were a lot of noticeable changes. For example, well, one of the things was the college, the expansion of the college, and that, there were a lot of structural changes involved with that. Towns that streets that used to be just little residential streets, all of a sudden had a huge multi-story building on it, and so that was one of the changes. The other change would have been, I think, the development of Tenney Highway.
Yeah.
That used to be just a little agricultural road going out toward Route 3A, and now it's obviously a very commercial area.
Yeah.
And there were changes along Main Street. There was a turnover of a lot of the stores right along Main Street.
Right.
First National, I think, moved down South Main, didn't they?
Mm-hmm.
And also Newberry's was gone.
Yeah.
I mean, Newberry's was one of the anchors along the Main Street. So those are changes as well.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of fun to do that every once in a while. People that you have worked with over time and that meant something to you. Can you share a few folks? Maybe who some of the farmers, you did some of that, but did you have friends? Did you have a best friend?
Yeah, I'd say my best friend was, when I was in school, was John Tier. He lived in town, but he happened to be really interested in outdoor hunting and shooting and that type of thing. So we got together, and in high school became really good friends, and we actually even in our junior and senior year in high school, we actually built a cabin up on Plymouth Mountain, which amounted to gathering a lot of second and third hand materials from tearing down old chicken houses and stuff on our farms and hauling them up to the mountain on Old Pike Hill Road, which is a Class 6 road, and getting these materials part way by vehicle and then lugging them up by hand the rest of the way. And we, by our senior year in high school, we actually had this little hunting camp all made, and it's still there.
I was just going to ask you, that was my next question. Is it still there?
It's still there. And
is it still used?
It is not used very frequently of late, but we try to get up there once or twice a year, just to clean off the roof and make sure that everything's all right.
When I think I've shared with you that Mary and I have walked up Pike Hill and we found the cemetery on the right that had Pearly Pike, correct? And there was something, when we met you one time, you shared that the date of the new stone they put in at the cemetery was incorrect?
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, we've always tried to figure out who replaced, not really replaced, substituted these new marble stones, headstones, for Pearly Pike and his wife Mary. And the original stones are still there. They're all broken up, but you can still read the engravings on the stones. And for some reason, the new stones are inaccurate in terms of Pearly's date of death. And I don't know how that happened, because
we're going to ask the audience today, so if they know, they're going to get back to us and let us know.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
That would really be.
Yeah. Because we had the question the first time we went there. It was amazing. We finally found it, and we said the same thing. Who did this? And we had no answer.
Right. And if you find out, let me know.
Well, vice versa. You let me know.
Okay.
Sounds good. You said your family, your parents, your brother, your sister, they were such an important influence on you growing up. Can you expand upon that? Just they're your brother and your sister.
Yeah, I know, but I was the youngest. I was only 5 in 1947, and my brother and sister were several years older than I was, and my parents and so on. Yeah, they all had an influence on me. I think probably because I was, a lot younger, and they taught me, good values of self-reliance and responsibility, and that stays with a person all their life.
Do you come from a working family? I talk about work ethic a lot with the people, especially in the year 2020. I better not say year, decade 2020. The older folks are always talking about the work ethic of the younger folks today. Did your family have a strong working ethic?
Absolutely. Not only do they have jobs in order to make a living, but living on a farm involves a lot of work on off hours.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I think that's stayed with me because I live in a place now where we have 250 acres of land, and with I have a sawmill, and I have a bunch of different heavy equipment, and we maintain 5 acres of lawn, and we have a pond, and and it just I think that the reason that we're in a place like that is because where I grew up.
Mm-hmm.
I just appreciate that type of life.
I'm glad there's still spots everywhere. Sometimes I would say to myself, everybody should work on a farm once. And I'm not trying to be mean at all. It's just being on a farm, the number of chores that you're required to do for daily living. But at the same time, you have beautiful scenery. You've got grassy hills, knolls, nature. Nature is so important, and I don't think we get it unless we're on a farm for a while.
And
hikers.
You always have something to do.
Oh, yeah. Check it off. Always, always. We are nearing completion right now. And I guess I want to say, is there something else that you would like to share, another story that we might have missed in my notes or your notes? And then I have one big question that I try to ask.
I can't think of anything. I'm sure there is. I'm sure there are plenty of things, but they just don't come to mind.
Wouldn't it be fun? We should have a call-in. That's my new. We should do that. That would be fun. A call-in where people can ask a question of you. Never thought of that
like
one.
A good idea.
We're going to say that to Dan. See what he agrees to. But my last question is, with the years that you and I have, you've been here for how many decades, and you've done quite a few things. So many interesting people that you've met, what you've learned over time. If you had a group of younger folks in front of you now, what might you say to them? Words of wisdom.
Well, I think I'd just tell them that they're very fortunate to live in the United States of America, and that a responsible and generous person of good character can make it in this country and live a happy life.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Well said. We are very fortunate, even in the times that we have seen, political things that we've seen, we're still so fortunate. Then it brings you right back to New Hampshire. We're so fortunate to live in New Hampshire.
That's right.
And then we can say our own towns. We've been so blessed. So blessed.
I agree.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us. I want to share, if I can, on the flash drive, we're going to be giving this to Dan, and you're going to hear some of the music. Was there a special song? I can't.
Well, I put 2 songs from our Limbo Rock album on there. One of them was written by me, and the other one was written by Les.
All right, fun.
So if they want to, Dan wants to put them in the mix, he's welcome to do.
All right. Thank you. It's been really fun.
Right,
I've learned a great deal. It was fun.
Good job.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It's always my pleasure. I know of I've heard of names before, but I've been so privileged to meet the people. Prior to this happening, we've spent a few hours together, and they always seem to bring me back how wonderful Plymouth is as a community. Whenever I say Plymouth and surrounding towns. We are so blessed to be here. So until next time, join us again on the Memories of Plymouth, and be well.